Unlocking Human Potential, a Practitioner's Guide to Motivation Theory in Organizational Settings. Abstract. Motivation remains one of the most critical yet complex drivers of organizational performance and individual well-being. This article synthesizes contemporary motivation theory, including self-determination theory, social cognitive theory, goal orientation frameworks, and attribution theory, to provide evidence-based guidance for practitioners navigating workforce engagement challenges. Drawing on recent empirical research and organizational case examples across healthcare, technology, and manufacturing sectors, we demonstrate how understanding the interplay between intrinsic drivers, autonomy, competence, relatedness, and extrinsic factors, incentives, recognition, structure, enables leaders to design interventions that sustain performance while fostering psychological well-being. The analysis reveals that organizations achieving superior outcomes integrate multiple motivational levers simultaneously, adapting approaches to individual differences and contextual demands. We propose a three-pillar framework for building long-term motivational capability: psychological contract evolution, distributed motivational leadership, and continuous learning systems. Organizations face unprecedented challenges in maintaining workforce engagement amid remote work transitions, technological disruption, and evolving employee expectations around meaningful work. Bantu et al. 2024. Despite decades of motivation research, many leaders struggle to translate theoretical insights into practical interventions that sustain both performance and well-being. The business case is compelling. Disengaged employees cost organizations substantially through reduced productivity, increased turnover, and diminished innovation capacity. Conversely, workplaces that successfully foster intrinsic motivation demonstrate measurably superior outcomes across multiple dimensions. Ryan and Deci. 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this imperative, as traditional extrinsic motivators became unavailable, forcing organizations to reconsider fundamental assumptions about what drives sustained effort. This article bridges the academic-practitioner divide by synthesizing major motivation theories into actionable frameworks. We examine how contemporary organizations apply these theories in practice, identify evidence-based interventions that work across diverse contexts, and propose pathways for building sustainable motivational capability. The organizational motivation landscape. Defining motivation in contemporary workplaces. Motivation represents the psychological forces that initiate, direct, and sustain work behavior toward specific goals. Bantu et al. 2024. Modern theory recognizes two fundamental types. Intrinsic motivation arises from internal factors, the inherent satisfaction of mastering new skills, enjoying complex problems, or alignment between work and personal values. Deci and Ryan. 2013. Extrinsic motivation stems from external factors, financial incentives, recognition, advancement opportunities, or avoidance of negative consequences. Ryan and Deci. 2000. Critically, these forms exist on a continuum and interact dynamically. Self-determination theory describes how initially external motivations can become internalized when they align with personal values and provide autonomy. Gagné and Deci. 2005. State of practice. Recent workforce surveys reveal troubling engagement trends, with substantial portions of employees describing themselves as not engaged or actively disengaged. Several converging drivers explain this crisis: misalignment between work design and psychological needs for autonomy, competence and relatedness. Ryan and Deci. 2020. Over-reliance on extrinsic motivators. Individual differences in goal orientations that organizations ignore. Bantu et al. 2024. And contextual volatility disrupting established motivational equilibria. Despite these challenges, leading organizations demonstrate that evidence-based motivation strategies generate measurable competitive advantage. Organizational and individual consequences of motivation dynamics. Organizational performance impacts. Motivation influences organizational outcomes through multiple pathways. Research applying social cognitive theory demonstrates that employees with higher self-efficacy consistently outperform peers on both quantity and quality metrics. Bandura. 2005. Production teams reporting higher intrinsic motivation show defect rates 15 to 30% lower than teams driven primarily by external incentives. Intrinsic motivation proves particularly critical for creativity and innovation. When individuals engage work because they find it inherently interesting, they demonstrate greater cognitive flexibility and persistence. Deci and Ryan. 2013. Organizations successfully fostering intrinsic motivation report innovation metrics substantially above industry averages. Goal orientation research reveals that employees with mastery approach orientations, focused on learning rather than merely outperforming others, adapt more successfully to organizational change. Elliott et al. 2011. During digital transformations, workforces characterized by mastery orientations demonstrate technology adoption rates 25 to 50% faster than comparison groups. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts. Self-determination theory research consistently demonstrates that satisfaction of basic psychological needs, autonomy, competence and relatedness, predicts not only work engagement but also general life satisfaction and overall psychological health. Ryan and Deci. 2020. Work environments that thwart these needs contribute to burnout and diminished life quality. Attribution theory reveals that individuals who attribute successes to controllable internal factors like effort and strategy develop more positive developmental trajectories. Wiener. 2010. Organizations cultivating adaptive attribution patterns enable employees to navigate setbacks constructively. Motivation's effects extend beyond employee boundaries. Intrinsically motivated customer-facing employees deliver measurably superior experiences, demonstrating greater empathy and problem-solving creativity. Ryan and Deci. 2000. In healthcare, patient satisfaction correlates significantly with provider intrinsic motivation levels. Evidence-based organizational responses. Autonomous supportive leadership and work design. Self-determination theory demonstrates that autonomy support, providing meaningful choice, minimizing control, and acknowledging individual perspectives, enhances both intrinsic motivation and internalization of initially external regulations. Deci and Ryan. 2013. Effective approaches include bounded discretion frameworks, participatory goal setting, choice architecture, transparent rationale provision, and psychological ownership mechanisms. Atlassian implemented Ship-It Days, quarterly events where employees gain complete autonomy to work on any project for 24 hours. These events generated numerous product innovations while significantly increasing employee engagement. Morningstar, a California tomato processing company, operates without formal management hierarchy, with employees negotiating commitments and self-managing. This radical autonomy support generates productivity 15 to 30% above industry standards. Competence development and mastery pathways. Social cognitive theory emphasizes self-efficacy as a primary motivational driver. Bandura. 2005. Employees develop self-efficacy through mastery experiences, vicarious learning, social persuasion, and managing physiological states. Organizational strategies include scaffolded challenge, structured feedback systems, observational learning opportunities, competence recognition, and growth-oriented language. Mayo Clinic implemented comprehensive mastery pathways combining simulation-based training, structured observation of experts, and progressive autonomy. This approach reduced medical errors by 35% while increasing provider confidence and intrinsic motivation. Toyota's production system incorporates continuous competence development through systematic problem-solving training and Kaizen improvement processes, generating both operational excellence and high employee engagement. Relatedness and psychological safety cultivation. Self-determination theory identifies relatedness as a fundamental psychological need. Ryan and Deci. 2020. Psychological safety, the belief that interpersonal risk-taking is safe, predicts learning behavior. Innovation and Performance. Edmondson, 2018. Implementation approaches include inclusive team rituals, vulnerability-based trust building, collaborative goal structures, conflict navigation skills, and social connection infrastructure. Pixar employs Brain Trust meetings where directors present work-in-progress films for candid peer feedback. Psychological safety derives from feedback givers having no formal authority. Critiques focusing on work rather than person, and reciprocal treatment. Diavita cultivates relatedness through village culture, emphasizing teammate relationships, contributing to retention rates 10 to 15 percentage points above healthcare industry averages. Strategic incentive and recognition design. Contemporary research presents a nuanced view of external rewards. Self-determination theory reveals that reward effects depend on administration. Controlling rewards can undermine intrinsic motivation, while autonomous supportive rewards that acknowledge competence enhance motivation. Deci et al. 2001. Evidence-based approaches include autonomous supportive framing, competence informational emphasis, aligned value structures, process and outcome balance, and intrinsic-extrinsic integration. Salesforce introduced Ohana Awards, where peers nominate colleagues for demonstrating company values, with recipients receiving recognition, moderate bonuses, and opportunities to participate in meaningful initiatives. This design satisfies relatedness through peer recognition and connects to intrinsic values. Employee engagement scores increased 12% following implementation. Adaptive attribution and growth mindset development. Attribution theory demonstrates that how individuals explain successes and failures profoundly influences subsequent motivation. Wiener. 2010. Attributing failure to controllable factors like effort enables learning and persistence, while attributing to fixed ability generates helplessness. Growth mindset research reveals that believing abilities can develop through effort predicts achievement and resilience. Dweck et al. 2014. Strategies include process-focused feedback, normalized struggle narratives, failure analysis protocols, capability language, and setback response training. Microsoft underwent cultural transformation under Satya Nadella, emphasizing growth mindset principles, shifting from know-it-all to learn-it-all culture. This attribution shift contributed to market capitalization growth and employee engagement improvements. Bridgewater Associates maintains a culture emphasizing radical transparency and systematic learning from mistakes, cultivating attributions focusing on controllable factors like analytical processes rather than uncontrollable conditions. Building long-term motivational capability. Motivational psychological contracts. Sustainable engagement requires ongoing alignment between organizational systems and individual psychological needs. Organizations can create structured processes for individuals to articulate their autonomy, competence and relatedness needs, enabling customized approaches. Regular touchpoints for revisiting motivational alignment address evolving needs across career stages. Reciprocal accountability requires leadership accountability for motivation outcomes alongside traditional performance metrics. Distributed motivational leadership. Contemporary practice recognizes that sustainable motivation emerges from distributed capability where individuals, teams, and formal leaders all contribute. Organizations cultivate lateral motivation through structured peer learning and mutual support systems. Social cognitive theory emphasizes self-regulation as central to sustained motivation. Bandura. 2005. Organizations can systematically develop these capabilities through training. Frontline managers receive evidence-based training in autonomy support, competence development, and attribution management. Systemic reinforcement alignment ensures HR policies, performance management, and reward systems support motivation principles. Continuous motivational learning systems. Sustainable capability requires learning systems capturing emerging insights and adapting approaches. Organizations establish measurement infrastructure tracking motivation indicators alongside operational metrics. Experimental approaches, piloting interventions, measuring outcomes systematically, and scaling what works, build internal evidence bases. Mechanisms for monitoring and integrating external research close the gap between academic knowledge and organizational application. Reflective practice cultures value discussion of motivation dynamics in team meetings and retrospectives. Conclusion: motivation represents a systematic organizational capability built through evidence-informed design and continuous learning. Contemporary theory provides practical frameworks for addressing concrete engagement challenges. Converging around actionable principles, sustainable motivation requires satisfying fundamental psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness, not simply optimizing extrinsic incentives. Motivational diversity matters. Individuals differ in goal orientations, attributional patterns, and value structures. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivations interact dynamically. Well-designed extrinsic systems can support intrinsic motivation when they provide competence information and enable autonomy. Motivation proves fragile without systemic support through aligned HR systems. Work design and organizational culture. Attribution patterns and mindsets profoundly influence motivational resilience. For practitioners, priorities include auditing current practices against self-determination theory needs, developing leaders' capability to diagnose motivational profiles, aligning incentive systems with autonomy and competence support, creating psychological safety, establishing motivation measurement systems, and building continuous learning infrastructure. The organizations profiled here demonstrate that motivation science translates into competitive advantage when implemented thoughtfully. They achieve superior performance precisely because satisfying psychological needs unlocks human potential that control-oriented approaches leave dormant. As work becomes increasingly complex, requiring creativity, adaptability, and sustained effort, organizations that master motivation science will increasingly outperform those treating it as peripheral to core business.